So what does it take to scale a single business into a multi-state, multi-brand powerhouse? In today's episode, we're going to unpack the secrets of exponential growth from a franchisee who's transformed one struggling location into 34 thriving locations and multiple brands. Now, whether you're a small business owner or an entrepreneur looking to level up, this conversation is going to be packed with insights on scaling, on leadership, and anything else that we want to talk about.
Welcome to Fortify Live with your host, Ford Saeks.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Today, we've got a really special guest, Jerry Akers. He's a true franchise success story, having turned a single Great Clips location into 34 locations. I definitely want to learn about how you did that. Plus, expanding into other brands, including the Joint Chiropractic, which I'm also a customer of both of your brands. Now, Jerry's all about helping others find the path to success. So whether you're in franchising or you're just looking to scale your business, this conversation is for you. He's also the co-author of a book called Live It to Own It, and runs a second-generation family business. Jerry, let's kick things off. Welcome to Fortify Live. You know, what got you started in entrepreneurship and then in franchising?
Oh, great question, Ford. And by the way, thanks for having me here. I go all the way back to 8 years old and wanting to own a ball glove that I couldn't afford and having to sell gift cards door to door to try and get there. But then I was a turnaround guy in corporate America and started investing in small businesses as a silent partner. And ultimately, a broker asked me if I'd be interested in owning a franchise. And I said, sure, if it was something that a GM could run and I could be kind of an absentee owner. That's what most people talk about, right?
Right.
He brought me Great Clips, and my first comment was, are you nuts? I will never be in hair care. But, we did our due diligence. We did, we called people and did validation. We went to Discovery Day. We did all those kinds of things and discovered that we felt like it was a good fit. So we bought an existing unit that was struggling, poorly managed, poorly run overall. We brought our corporate identity. So we cleaned the place up. We fixed the staff. When I say fix the staff, you're training them to do better customer service and helping them to decide if this is where they want to work or not, to be very honest.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, once we had all of that done, we remarketed it. I know our tagline at that time was new owners, new attitude, because we knew our customers were still in that marketplace. They just had given up on us. So in about 8 months, we doubled the revenue in that first one that we bought and made it very profitable. And, it was just to kind of stabilize our retirement. We only wanted one unit. And then, as often happens, we were approached for somebody to buy 4 more struggling ones. Took those on within the first year. We went from 0 to 5. And those within 3 years had tripled in revenue. So we set out on a path to kind of corner the market, to use a monopoly term. And we created relationships with the other franchisees in the area and told them we'd be interested in buying them if they ever wanted out. And over the next 2 or 3 years, we bought out the balance of the market and then started adding on. And then, to make a long story short, over the next 15 years, we bought out several other markets. Now our salons spread all the way from the Mississippi River all the way to almost Colorado along Interstate 80. So that's kind of the basics of how we went from 1 to 34.
Well, congratulations on your success. Now, if you're listening to this episode is live right now on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and a few other places. And the audio from this also becomes the Business Growth Show podcast. So if you're listening to your car, listening to this episode, or watching the replay, you can check out Jerry Akers. It's Akers. And obviously, he's a Great Clips franchisee, but the best place to reach him online is Z Dynamics. And I'm going to spell it ZDYNAMIX. So ZDYNAMIX.com. So you can check him out there because he's also a business coach and he does a lot of other things. And so welcome to this. I'm just excited. So this just proves the point. I mean, as I go in, I speak at corporations and we've met before at IFA and things. When I'm brought in, I always have to overcome the mindset piece because some franchisees will say, well, there's just too much competition and I can't find good people. And they're pointing at all the other things externally, which are true. There's a lot of competition, but they're not taking personal accountability for their own success. And you're a proven example of, you went into a market that was struggling, a location that was struggling for a variety of reasons. starting with the leadership and the management, and then of course the attitude of the team members. And you maybe had to free some people up for new opportunities because you either coach them to standard or you got to free them up, right? So it just proves the point that there are external factors, but there are internal factors that really have a bigger impact on success. Do you agree?
I agree 100%. I preach all the time, not only within my own company, but when I work with other companies that, there are things in the franchise world or the business world that we have no control over. And it's always easy to point to them as the main reason you simply are not being successful. The fact is, there's a lot that you do control. So let's focus on the things we control, fix them, put them on a different platform, and then we'll see if we can't get past some of those other hurdles. So you're spot on with your comment, Ford.
What do you do when you're working with a business owner that maybe doesn't see that up front? So you can tell them, hey, you need this. Where do you start with them to help them shift their perspective and mindset? Oh, and by the way, everybody listening to this, these are not pre-planned questions. Jerry has no idea what I'm going to ask, and I have no idea what he's going to say. So, we're here having this conversation. So what do you do with a business owner or a franchisee that's maybe struggling, but they're maybe blaming the brand instead of taking accountability?
Especially franchisees or business owners that are struggling, want to find other people or other things to blame. That's human nature, so I'm used to it. I'm sure you deal with it too, Ford. The thing is, I ask them to break it down. First off, give me all the things that are keeping you from being successful. I don't care whether they're internal or external. They'll focus on the external ones and forget the internal ones. So then I ask them, for the typical things, their metrics compared to corporate metrics, compared to the FDD. I ask for their financials, and then I break those down. And I go back to them and I ask them leading questions because I think that's what good coaches do.
Sure, of course.
And I ask them to talk about that particular thing. I'll say, so let's look at this metric that corporate says is mandatory for you to find success. They're saying the number is X, yours is Y. Talk to me about that. Because in those conversations, I generally find the nexus of the problem related to that category anyhow. And that gives me the opportunity to have a conversation with them about one category at a time and then dig into it. And before long, generally they're saying, okay, you're right. There are things I can do internally to fix that. I go, okay, let's work on that one thing, get you beyond where you're at right now, because I believe you're going to see a lot of positive outcomes. And then it'll be much easier for you and I to work together as we tackle those other things. Now, along the way, generally in the first 2 or 3 months of doing that kind of stuff, we get to the point where they're finding substantial changes to their business and financial position, having not touched any of those external things. And then maybe we take a look at some of the external things and see if there's ways that we won't be able to change most of them, but maybe there's ways internally that we can deal with whatever the outcomes are that are impacted by those things.
Yeah, I think it really starts with asking the right questions. I have a saying, if you're asking the wrong question, the answer doesn't matter. And as we're both, coaches and consultants and speakers too. And what I found is, if you can get the person to ask a better question, it does shift their mindset and it lets them focus on what they can control, which is their allocation of time, their attitude, and the actions that they take. And so if you're listening to this now and you're thinking about your business, there's no such thing as a money problem. I know you're going to get backlash in the comments here in a minute, but there's really a value problem. If you want to make more money, add more value. If you want to get more customers, add more value. Look at the journey map of your customer experience from the time they become a suspect to a prospect to a customer or client all the way to an advocate, right? And so you're living proof of that, and you've taken the same formula not only to the Great Clips and where you've done from 1 to 34, but also the Joint Chiropractic and other brands bring you in to help them coach and understand what's challenging. What are some of the other challenges you face? Obviously, mindsets is one of them. What are some of the other obstacles you've had to overcome, either in your multi-brand, multi-unit businesses or that you see when you work with other clients?
Well, yeah, I'll talk about mine primarily here because I think especially in my position being a franchisee and coaching franchisees and franchisors, I think it's powerful that you admit where some of your learnings have come from, which are long-lasting education, right, Ford? And learnings are another keyword for mistakes. So, my learnings have come from trying things that didn't work and then instead of giving up on them, going back to the drawing board and tweaking them to get to the point where they will. So, many people, when they talk to me, because I get approached all the time by
Mm.
franchisees thinking about scaling, but being scared about it. So let's talk about what the fears are and how we can combat those. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but there's a whole list of things that we talk about to take those fears away. But in our case, when you do an acquisition of 10 struggling salons all at the same time, you're going to be upside down financially. So you've got to figure out how to cover that cash gap. It's going to take you time and maybe even money to fix the internal problems to get over the curve. So you've got to be ready to deal with that. So I know the first time we bought a larger group, that was a bit of a learning curve because I'm an optimist at heart and I believe that we could turn it around, frankly, quicker than we could. So I learned a lot from that first time. So the next couple of big acquisitions, we were able to plan ahead for the cash gap primarily and the time that would go into it. And that allows me now with franchisees that consult with me who want to do that to share that story and to help look at their financials, the financials of the acquisition and so on, and try and figure out how we can minimize the impact of that on them as they take this on. So that's one of the best stories I've got. I think growing too fast comes with a lot of extra pain. And so preparing yourself for all of those potential outcomes so that you don't face a lot of them. You take care of them before you get there. And again, coaching other franchisees, most of the time I find franchisees are too close to the action and miss the forest for the trees, right? And so, I've had one recently that was blaming all those exterior things you and I talked about, including corporate. And so I asked those questions, and ultimately, digging into it, we found out that they had done a poor job of staffing. She was leaning on her leadership team to do something that they weren't doing, and in essence, was leaving about $80,000 a month on the table in potential income because of the staffing and scheduling issues. Again, no clue until we dug into it. And I think most business owners and franchisees could say that to some extent about their own operation if they want to be, honest with themselves.
Yeah, I think it's really important to realize that accounting is looking out the rearview mirror, finance is looking out the windshield, and I've said that before on my episodes, but it rings true. No matter what business you have, there has to be key performance indicators, and the numbers don't lie. I mean, I'm a creative, visionary type kind of guy, but at the same time, I'm also very analytical and can look at my financials. I understand my chart of accounts. I understand my ratios. I understand my key performance indicators and what numbers I need to move. I know what my conversion rate is. I know what the cost to acquire a customer is, and I know what the long time value of a customer is. And so those are basic metrics that any business needs to know. And it's interesting though, because when I speak at a conference and we'll do an exercise and I'll say, who can tell me what your cost to acquire a customer? And I can't find my little cricket button right now, but I get crickets, right? I actually have a cricket sound effects. It's on a different screen, but so I get crickets and I tell them, look, it's not an exact number. I realize referrals are the shortest way to acquire a customer because if you do a good job, that's the first thing. You're going to take care of your existing customer. But when you're out talking about growing, in my eyes, you either get more high value customers. We don't want more customers. We want high value customers, right? And number two,
Yeah.
you want to increase the average transaction. Well, how can you add more value? I know when I go into Great Clips, they give me a great customer experience at the location that I go to. And then they ask me, do I need any hair care products? They're always asking me, and then they ask me, would you like to set your next appointment? So they're creating that experience beyond just that one thing. So they're adding value. Then it's repeat and referral sales. How do you either get someone to refer you, or how do you get more business more often? And then how can you improve operations? And so what I've been doing lately is speaking a lot on AI innovations, because all the franchisees and business owners are using AI, but there's no best practices. There's brand damage. It hallucinates. They've got all this stuff that hurts their brand because they're jumping in without really knowing. And so I know that's a lot to unpack, but I just know that when it comes to business, I've always been a firm believer the economy is always going to be challenging. There's always going to be government regulations and compliance and different things. Ownership is going to change. In franchising, it changes. Brands grow, then they become part of a private equity group, or they just keep growing. And so there's always changes. But I think that what I've always had to learn the hard way, and maybe because I'm in a lot of mentorship groups like Entrepreneurs Organization and things like that, is that at the end of the day, I'm personally accountable for all my actions and, most importantly, inactions. If I don't have what I want, it's my inactions. And I know I work with a lot of people who say, well, I don't have time. I don't have time to do this. And I spoke for Orange Theory years ago, and I actually Anytime Fitness now, because they're part owned by the same group. But when I spoke for Anytime Fitness, I made a comment from stage about how, oh, I'd really like to work out more, but I'm busy. And from the audience, one of the franchisees stood up and said, "What are you doing at 6 a.m.?" I said, "Sleeping." He goes, "Then you do have time." And he said, "It's not that you don't have time, it's that it's not a priority." And that, so that's one idea can change your life, right? So now if I hear myself saying, I don't have time, my brain is actually saying, is this a priority? Because we do have time for the things we want to do. There are people who make time to do it. I ride bikes with a guy that rides 100 miles a week. He works at an aircraft company. He comes home at 4:30. He gets on his bike at 5. He rides till 6 or 7 every night, 5 days a week, gets over 100 miles. And so I know it's possible if you take the time.
Yeah. Well, and you can bring that right back to franchising and running your own business. It's a mindset thing. So much of what we do is mindset forward, and I'm preaching to the choir when I talk to you about that. But, I work with franchisees all the time that when we bring up some of the inconsistencies in their business, the first thing they do is to go in defensive mode because they think they're doing a great job or their staff is doing a great job or whatever the case might be, because that's what we do, right? We think everybody's doing what we expect them to do. But the fact is, to your point, I, as a franchisee, have other things I can do better. I may not prioritize it. I may not think it's worthwhile, but I could do it better. So every franchisee out there, I would argue, is in the same boat. And we trained our staff and we feel close to them. So we think they're doing a great job. When you get a third party looking at that, you get a very different message.
Yeah.
And if you're defensive about it, you can't fix it. So sometimes at my position, similar to yours, I would say, changing the way they look at that and the way they understand it, and then what they're going to do with it is one of the biggest hurdles that I run into all the time. And just like many things in life, we can be our own worst enemies in franchising. So for me, it sometimes takes 3 to 5 weeks to get past all of that baggage before we really. I wear them down and get to the point where I've shown them enough material and data from their own financials and their own metrics and things like that, that they have to start looking at it differently than they did when they started. And when that happens, there's an epiphany, there's a shifting, and things just start going into hyperdrive and businesses start exploding.
Well, since you work with franchisees in a lot of different brands across the nation and through your company with Z Dynamics, what are some other common mistakes you see that franchisees make, and how can they avoid them? Like, what do you see some of the top challenges they're making, and what do you suggest that they do? And I know you've got the book. Now, is your book on Amazon, Live It to Own It?
Amazon.
All right. So if you check him out, we're talking to Jerry Akers. Go to Amazon and get his book, Live It, the number 2, Live It to Own It. All right. So what are some of the franchisee mistakes? And then what advice would you give them?
Number one, trying to do all things. They simply can't. So finding great third parties to do some of your pieces, hiring a great general manager that comes with different skill sets than you, and allowing those people to do their job. You find the things you're best at that make the biggest impact on your company and stay in your lane. Don't get into theirs. Don't micromanage. I'd say micromanaging is probably the biggest hurdle I run into all across the board, because it's their business. They want to manage the whole thing. And they just hate to admit that, they really suck at marketing, or they're not good at people management, or they make bad decisions hiring, or whatever it might happen to be. So that's probably one of the biggest mistakes I see them making. In some cases, managing, this is really simple. Franchising is really simple. If you manage to your metrics, and the corporation gives you successful metrics to work with, if you manage to those, take excuses away, and do everything you can to get to those metrics, the math works. It's not rocket science. It's just follow the system. So arguing about the metrics, complaining, as we talked about, that there's something that keeps them from meeting those metrics or whatever, that's probably the second biggest one, because I find so many of them buy a franchise and then want to create it in their own image rather than just following the successful brand they bought. So breaking down some of those barriers can be a big hurdle for the next one. And I'd say the one that is the scariest for me, and sometimes the hardest to correct when it happens, is when they grow too fast and they outkick their coverage, and they find themselves generally in a financial hole that takes time to get out of. So I can't tell you how many times people have listened to me speak. and said, I wish I would have met you, a year ago or something like that. And then I hear their story and I go, well, yeah, if we'd have talked a year ago, this is the way that I look at what your financial situation would be today. Because I can see just talking to them what caused their problem, and I can extrapolate and figure out what that meant financially. I'm probably similar to you. I'm a sales guy at heart. I was in sales my early career in
Right. Me
corporate
too.
America. Yeah, okay. So I'm used to taking a bunch of extraneous data and averaging it and being able to, on the fly in a conversation, throw that back to the customer or prospective customer and say, what I'm hearing is you could have made 50,000 more dollars last year had you done X, Y, and Z. First off, they want to argue with me, so then we have to actually get a pen and paper and
Right.
calculator and work it out. But I'm usually very close, and then I have shocked them to the point where they'll start listening. But the bottom line is, I have to break down all those barriers just as you do, and once you do, you can get there. And I would say the last one, and this is very common sense too. It costs money to get help, whether it's a third party that's going to help you with some of your things, or a consultant or a business coach or whatever. It costs money, especially when people get in trouble. The first thing they do is shut down all the money.
Right.
Well, not getting help got you to where you're at. What's not getting help now going to do to help with that situation? So, in many times, in many times we've got to go through some of the financials of it, and we've got to come to some conclusions, because I'm happy to turn their business around. Generally, I can do it pretty quickly, but time's valuable, right? So we've got to figure out how to make that work. And I've made a lot of concessions to a lot of people over the years to help them get through what they're doing. And we provide a lot of products that are very low cost, because we got to have a starting point to get people help, and it's got to be manageable on their end. So, and that one I totally get, because we were running on our bootstraps for a long time when we started. We didn't have extra cash, and sometimes we had to, take money from Rob Peter to pay Paul so that we could get the improvements that we needed, whether it be in marketing or whatever the case might be.
Yeah. It's a lot of times I find that sometimes it's not that they don't want to, it's they don't know what they don't know. And so they need to be
Yeah,
open-minded. They need to be critical thinkers. They need to be coachable and need to be willing to invest. I mean, my speaking fees aren't cheap. My consulting fees aren't cheap. And I have clients sometimes say, oh, well, I couldn't afford that. And I'm like, what's the cost of your turnover costing you? What's the cost of your average
yeah,
transaction? When they start really looking at the numbers, and I tell them, I said, look, I understand. I'll call you back in 6 months. I've got a Zoho CRM. I'll put it in my tickler system to call them back.
yeah,
But I'll tell them, if you change nothing, nothing changes. If you don't do anything, what makes you think in 6 months? In 6 months, you're going to be in a worse situation, and you won't even have
right.
the credit or the cash to be able to invest to fix the problem. I said, so if you want to change the trajectory, you've got to invest. And it's always an interesting thing, because even as a speaker, I mean, I've had, I spoke for a lot of groups, and they'll say, well, what's your fee? And I tell them the fee. And then they'll say, well, there's somebody cheaper. And I say, well, let me ask you this. You're trying to bring someone in to help accelerate local marketing, boost sales, right? Yes, yes. I said,
Yeah,
do you really want to hire somebody else that hasn't even learned how to make it to the top of their own game to come and teach you how to be successful? And is it the first thing you want me to do is to cut my price? Is that what you want me to help your franchisees? So they have to get this perspective to realize it's value for value at the end of the day. The only reason I've been able to be a Hall of Fame keynote speaker and be successful for 3 decades, including through all the changes that have happened, especially in the last 3 years, is because I'm timely, topical, and relevant, and I'm coachable. I
right.
know what I don't know. I love having these conversations with smart people like you, because I learn. And I think that the people who are really successful are continual learners. They're willing to go to the conferences, be on those calls, be part of the franchise advisory council if they have one, and to look at who the network with other franchisees. Like when I go to a conference, I'm always surprised when I say, raise your hand if you're in a mastermind, and very few raise their hand sometimes. I'm like, look, before you leave, meet 5 people that are critical thinkers that will call you on your crap and that you can work on, and then find a way to meet once or twice a month, at least once a month, where you can bring up your biggest issues, because people in that room have already solved the problem. I mean, that's the whole
Yeah.
reason I do this podcast, is to share insights from experts like you that have done it and are doing it. I mean, with all the different brands. Now, do you just have the 2 brands, or are you in more brands now?
Well,
Not that
currently I
that's
only
not
have the
enough,
two
by the
brands.
way.
Well, currently I'm in the two brands, mainly because Z Dynamics is growing so fast, to be very honest with you, because, anybody in our situation gets opportunities all the time.
Sure.
I have been partners in others, sold out my piece of them several times just because either the majority partner wanted to own it all again or whatever, and I don't have any problem in those cases. It's probably the right thing to do. In some cases, I've got minority ownership just for coaching them and helping them get to the next
Sure.
level. So when I get them there, I should expect them to come back and buy me out. That's part of the deal. So,
Right.
so that's the only two I've got right now. But Z Dynamics has taken so much time, and frankly, I won't speak for you, but I'm of an age when many people are retired. I don't see ever retiring in my world,
Yeah, I'm the
but
same way. People say I should at my age, but I'm like, I'm not retiring.
no, I'd be bored. Um, but truthfully, Z Dynamics is growing so fast. I'm putting as much time as I can into that because I can touch, and this is really me at heart. I like changing lives through franchising. I don't know of another model around that changes more lives. I look at our businesses. We've got roughly 250 employees. In Great Clips, many of them are single moms. So they've got 3 kids. So at the end of the day, every week, my entrepreneurship touches 1,000 lives right in my organization, between the employees and their kids and their spouses and all those kinds of things. So I want to give that to everybody. I want other franchisees to live the life that I do, having a lake house, being able to work virtually rather than going to an office all the time and those kinds of things. I want them to change other lives. I want them to have time to do the thing. I want them to have a second generation company like I do, because my daughters are frankly smarter and younger and better looking than I am, so they're going to do a better job than I did. And I've changed, their lives and their kids' lives through this. So I'm happy to work really hard through Z Dynamics to impact lots of franchise systems and the franchisees, rather than worry about one or two more brands for me. It wouldn't surprise me that I end up with 2 or 3 more before I quit in a partnership or something like that. But I got to tell you, I'm having so much fun working with these franchisors and franchisees. I just can't imagine doing anything else.
No, I appreciate that. And as we get ready to wrap up this episode, any closing thoughts you have for those listening that want to be in business or in business or be successful? Any closing thoughts?
Yes, number one, if you've been thinking about being a franchisee, quit thinking. I waited too many years to get started. Man, get it going, because this is going to change your life in ways you can't even begin to understand. If you're a franchisee and you're thinking about scaling, same answer. Quit thinking about it. Find some trusted advisors to help you with it. I'm not selling books, but read my book. Talk to smart people like Ford. I mean, there's lots of us out here that can help you get over that hurdle. And if you're struggling as a franchisee, we need to talk, because whether you do business with me or not, I will still give you some advice that'll help you get to that next level, because franchising changes lives, and I'm here to help change a lot of them. So that is my parting shot for the day, Ford.
Hey, thank you so much for being part of Fortify and sharing such great insights, Jerry.
Thank you, Ford.
Thank you for tuning in to Fortify Live. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the Business Growth Show podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. We air weekly at 11 a.m. Central Time. So until next week, keep pushing the boundaries and never stop growing.